Alrighty, good morning, everyone, wherever you're connecting from. It's bright and early here in Vancouver, and today you've joined the State of Monetization 2025, what's really happening in B2B SaaS pricing. Today, we've got the one and only Kyle Poyer, as well as Stephen Forth from Ibbaka. Chat's open, Q&A is open. We do have 2 polls in the session, and as usual, we're going to we'll send you guys all the links, the recording, the deck, so you guys got everything you need. If you haven't already, the State of Monetization 2025 report by Kyle, that's already up on his Growth Unhinged newsletter. I encourage everyone here to sign up to that if you haven't already, and follow Kyle and Stephen on LinkedIn. So yeah, put into the comments where you're logging in from today, and I'll let Kyle do a little quick intro, and then Stephen, it's yours.
Kyle, take it away.
Sounds good. So I've been working on monetization for the past 15 years or so. I started my career at a firm called Simon Kucher doing pricing strategy consulting. At that point, it was still, I think, a lot of even on-prem to SaaS transitions, really early days of SaaS pricing. I then moved to OpenView, which is an expansion stage investor in software companies, where I was an operating partner and worked across the portfolio companies around pricing and monetization, but then really everything that relates to growth and monetization. I write a newsletter called Growth Unhinged, where I share my insights from working hands-on with companies on these topics. It's now read by 73,000 folks, which is exciting. And I think to me, the most fun part of doing this all is I've never operating in pricing at a time with so much change, given particularly AI and AI agents. And so this is going to be a really fun conversation.
Thank you, Kyle. So just briefly, Stephen Forth, CEO and one of the co-founders of Ibbaka. And I am crazy interested in the intersection of innovation, value, and pricing. I've been working at that intersection for about the same amount of time as Kyle. I come out of the tech space, so I have started, grown, exited, invested in, failed at, succeeded at a number of different tech companies. And I have to say, there is more change happening now than any time in my lifetime. And I lived through the late 90s bubble, had a company, made a lot of money from it. I lived through the tech wreck, lost a lot of money. I lived through the on-prem to cloud and SaaS conversion. All of those things are minor blips, I think, compared to what is happening now. And Kyle has his pulse on what's happening. So I'm really looking forward to learning from him and to this conversation. Liam, shall we go on to the next slide? Yeah, so we're just going to look at some of the themes that Kyle identified from his survey. Again, if you haven't got the State of B2B Monetization report, it's, I think, mandatory reading for anyone in our space, as is subscribing to Growth Unhinged, by the way. So these are things that Kyle noticed as he was doing this survey and analysis. So the future of pricing transparency. I'm getting tired of talking about outcome-based pricing, but I guess we have to. How to build a more agile pricing function amid so much change, disruption. This is something, hey, I run a company that is deeply concerned with value and pricing, and I am thinking about this. And finally, the impact of AI and agents on conventional SaaS. So why don't we kick it off with a quick poll? And I can't answer this. But when we discuss it, when Kyle discusses pricing transparency, I'll give my answer for Ibbaka and how that's going to need to change.
Did you want to take a guess before I share the results, Stephen?
Nah,
No.
I have a track record of guessing wrong on these polls. So
Okay. Kyle, that's really 73,000 subscribers. I remember when you mentioned it was like 60 That's really awesome. That's really impressive. Good job.
Still
All right.
growing. Just gotta hope that the new subscribers beat out the unsubscribes.
All
Turn.
right. We're nearly at a minute, so I'm just going to end it in 5 seconds. All right. Here we go.
Okay, it'll be interesting to compare this with the survey data. So shall we go on to the next slide? So Kyle, I was surprised at this data and a little bit disappointed. But before I comment, I'd like to hear your interpretation of this.
Yeah, well, and I can orient folks. So we asked about whether your pricing was transparent or publicly available online, and gave folks 4 answer options. So it was either yes, we publish our pricing online, yes, but only for product and growth or self-service plans. So a portion of their pricing is available. We do not publish our pricing, but we do show our plans. So those are those pricing pages that seem to have no pricing information. And then the final group is just no, we don't have any sort of public pricing. And split the data based on the average annual contract value of the company. So if they were, less than $1,000 per year, which would be just, sub $100 a month, or, all the way up to greater than 100K ACV. And I think, interpreting the data, I used to be of the mindset that the shift towards pricing transparency just seemed inevitable. I mean, hiding pricing felt like a relic of the 90s and 2000s. It felt like savvy buyers do more and more research online. They often want to get started with free trials and premium products. They might go and ask a Perplexity or a Chat GPT about pricing information. They might, go and message their peers or ask in online communities about pricing. There's Reddit threads. There's also tools like Vendor has a free Chrome extension that crowdsources data from their customer base. Like, it feels like if pricing is going to be increasingly out there and available, which, it seemed like that was going to be the case, you would want to make your pricing public to let you both tap into buyer demand and search traffic. So have the intent land on your website versus, someone else's website. And also allow you to control the narrative around your pricing versus someone else controlling it on your behalf and then presenting it, how they want to present it. The other thing for me is that, you've got a lot of people that are not ever going to be qualified buyers because your pricing model doesn't align with their budget or, how they want to buy. And, in some ways, you just rather screen out these disqualified buyers before they waste your team's time and only talk to folks who are more qualified. Now, that's what I thought was going to happen. That's not exactly playing out. If you look at the data, there are still, folks that make pricing transparent around generally the sub 5,000 ACV range. Generally, anyone that has essentially a deal size below $500 a month, there's a good chance that pricing is transparent. That also means folks that have some sort of product like growth offering where you can buy self-service, your pricing needs to be out there. But everyone else, not so much. And this is actually, I would say, I've polled folks over time. There's less transparency around pricing than there was even a few years ago. And I think part of it is that for many software companies, especially earlier stage businesses or businesses with AI products, they don't have their pricing totally figured out. And as soon as they publish pricing online, it does get much harder to adjust without confusing folks. And in the meantime, if they keep pricing intransparent, that gives them some flexibility to change things without it being obvious to the entire market that they're changing things or still in testing mode. I think the other factor is that pricing models are getting a lot more complicated. There's a lot of, for instance, hybrid pricing models or AI credit-based models or various things that make it so that buyers might not trust what they're seeing on a website, or it might be challenging to convey the pricing simple enough for someone to grok it relatively quickly. And so when complexity goes up, generally buyers want to talk to a real person, or you want to be able to prepare a custom quote for a customer. Now, I think that, as we'll get into, Stephen, it's these feel like temporary trends, right? We should be able to figure out AI pricing. We should be able to offer simplified buying experiences. And so I'm not sure if this is like a permanent shift in the market away from transparency, but that's certainly what the market is showing right now.
Yeah. So Kyle, I quite often use generative AI tools to explore pricing and compare pricing between vendors. And sometimes when I do that, if there's no pricing information available, the AI will hallucinate. And sometimes it says it's hallucinating it if you construct your prompts right. And this is different to some extent between the OpenAI models versus the Anthropic versus Perplexity and so on. Sometimes it will tell you that it's making an estimate, and other times it will just hallucinate it. But in my experience, and I've done this in about 100 cases so far, you are generally penalized if the AI cannot figure out your pricing. One example, it estimated the pricing for a well-known customer value management vendor, and I actually know how much they price, and the AI got it about 10x wrong, too expensive, which I think is bad for them. As you said, people are using AI to screen vendors and to define requirements. So what do you think the impact of changes to the buying process, that as it becomes more reliant on AI, are going to do to pricing transparency?
Yeah, I mean, it's great questions. I don't know if, well, I think that the buying behavior is starting to change. I don't know if people fully trust AI yet around things like pricing information or fully comparing vendors, but I think that we will get into that place a lot faster than many folks think. But like, I don't think we're there yet, but it's happening more and more, right? I think that one of the best things folks can do is make sure that they have a pretty solid online presence that at least refers to pricing information. So this group of like, no, we don't show our pricing, but we show our plans. Can you have whether it's documentation or FAQs or maybe a pricing page that has rough pricing information about to inform folks how you price, even if it doesn't give the exact price points? I think there's more of that information that you can put out there, but you also want to make sure that you're showing up in analyst reviews and third-party review sites. You have plenty of social proof around both the value of what your product does and pricing or affordability, and that can also speak for you even if you're not ready to make your pricing totally transparent.
Yeah, so Kyle, I'm going to be optimistic. I'm going to remain optimistic after all these years and say that once some of the issues you've identified are worked out, how we're going to price AI and agents, how we are going to represent and make it easy to understand hybrid models of various types, that we will see a trend towards pricing transparency. And if anyone wants to do it, I'm willing to put a bet on longbets.org to that effect. And I will donate my winnings, should I win, to the charity of Kyle's choice. So let's see if we get any takers on that. I might actually push Mark on or Stiving or someone like that on that. But let's go on to the next theme. So outcome-based pricing. Boy, we've been talking about this a lot for the last, I'm going to say 3 years, but certainly for the last year. What's happening with outcome-based pricing?
Yeah, well, it's someone wrote a comment on one of my LinkedIn posts that basically said outcome-based pricing is the future and always will be, and that cracked me up because I think that is kind of a great pithy summary of what's going on. So looking at the data here, I asked folks, what was your primary pricing model 12 months ago? What's your primary pricing model now? And what do you expect your primary pricing model will be in 3 years? And now, obviously, as we know, there's often multiple models out there. Some folks will have, a combination of seats and subscriptions and features and whatever. So I just asked for pick one as your primary model. So it's not perfect, but it indicates what's happening in the market. For the group around the current pricing model, about 22% said they have essentially flat fee subscriptions, so just fixed price. 15% said they're primarily seat-based, which is both the flat fees and seat-based are down pretty significantly from a year ago. 17% were usage-based, 5% were outcome-based, and then 41% had a hybrid model. So that was, overwhelmingly the most common. But if you look at what folks expect in 3 years, 25% said that they expect pricing to be outcome-based. And I think that's where there's just so much appetite and interest. But also a lot of folks struggling with, not feeling like they're in a position to charge based on outcomes right now. And I think if I were to think about like why, what's the bull case for outcome-based pricing, right? Like why will it become a thing, or if it'll become a thing? If I'm an AI agent, I'm increasingly doing the work for a customer, and so you're essentially doing work that otherwise that maybe a person, a services firm, a contractor would be doing. And there's also real costs for delivering that AI agent service through underlying tokens and so on. And if you think about how you could charge a fixed fee, but some of your customers are going to be very high usage folks. Your margins might be low or negative. Uh, Other folks might charge on a seat-based, might run into the same issues. If you charge on a usage-based, charge folks for things like tokens, pricing's unpredictable, but also like you could have customers that are high usage from a token standpoint where you deliver no outcomes. And so you're not aligned with what the customer is actually trying to achieve. And pricing and value can be really out of whack with some of these AI models. To put this in perspective, at Intercom, they told me when they launched their AI agent, which autonomously resolves customer support queries, when they launched, they were at about 25% resolution rate. Now they've upped that to closer to 60% now, and they even just recently launched essentially $1 million guarantee to get to above a human grade resolution rate, or you could get up to $1 million back. Now, if they charge on a usage basis, they would have no incentive to keep delivering these outcomes, keep improving their models. There's constant A/B testing, incremental improvements that happen to get to that resolution rate. And I think that for outcome-based pricing, it's, if you can unlock it, the communication is really clear. It shows that you're willing to stand behind your product. It also favors whoever is best at offering the most outcomes, because you're able to really build a moat around your product and your pricing, which I can talk about the sort of math behind that and the mechanics. But I think the challenges that folks run into, and that I'm sure you want to talk about, Stephen, are that many products aren't just an AI agent for one specific task, right? So if you have a vertical AI agent that does one thing and does it really well, there's defined success criteria, defined outcomes that the customer is trying to achieve, defined ROI associated with those outcomes, like outcome-based pricing is great, but most products are still a mix of software and AI. They help customers do a variety of things. They're selling to multiple industries, multiple buyer personas, multiple user types within the organization. There's not one target outcome that they're solving for. The other thing is that while there's a lot of excitement about AI agents, we're still in a world where we're probably still more in like the agent co-pilot sort of phase, where folks don't trust agents to own a process from beginning to end and own the attribution around the outcomes. But it's a combination of people plus AI that's ultimately delivering the outcomes. And in those types of environments, you start to be skeptical about AI charging you for your own success. It starts to feel like AI is trying to take credit for things that you're doing, not just what the AI is doing.
Yeah, so I want to delve into outcome-based pricing a bit more, but before we do that, I just want to call out something super important that you said about Intercom and Fin.AI, which was the way that they approached benchmarking and the way that they fought hard every day for incremental improvements to their benchmarking. And that really resonated with me. As I think you know, Kyle, Ibbaka is bringing its own agents to market later this year. And I thought, okay, we have to build benchmarking deeply into our process. And I think this is one of the things that, the AI industry lives on benchmarks. All the foundation models compete to do well on the different benchmarks. Um, they're bought on the basis of benchmarks. The whole current Gen AI deep learning industry got started through a benchmark on ImageNet. So I think one of the things that people like you and I need to really be helping people with is understanding benchmarking and the role that benchmarking is going to play in agents and the development of pricing, regardless of whether it's outcome based or not. I mean, when I read your, it's probably on Growth Unhinged, I can't remember where you published it, but when I read that interview with Intercom, um, it was an aha moment for me. One of the two big aha moments I've had this year. So first, I want to thank you for that, and thank Intercom for that, and also just we need to really develop expertise in benchmarking. So just wanted to call that out. Coming
Yeah, I think those are really interesting points, Stephen. And to me, a lot of this is that we're used to selling based on features. As much as people have said that they're selling based on value, we've said, hey, look, we could do X. The competition can't do X. And I think now, especially with the ability to use AI coding tools like a cursor, lovable bold, the ability to offer the feature is becoming table stakes. But now the question is, how good good is your feature? How well does it perform? And AI-based outputs are not consistent, right? They don't always produce a positive result. There's hallucinations, there's lack of context, there's whatever it is. And so we now need to educate people about value in terms of the performance or the quality of the features as opposed to the features themselves, which is just a totally different way of educating people about how to buy.
Yeah. And to the extent that one of the conversations we've been having at Ibbaka this week is, should the benchmarking be built into the app itself so that the app and then once you do that, how transparent are you going to be about sharing your benchmarking? Are we, we're struggling to be transparent about sharing our pricing. Are people going to be willing to share their benchmarking? And if they don't, there will be more and more third-party benchmarks that they will be held to. So anyway, it's going to be fun and super interesting. And I still have a lot of questions in my mind about this. Coming back to outcomes-based pricing, though, it seems to me that in order to have outcomes-based pricing, one has to first agree on the outcome, second, agree on the attribution of the outcome, and third, one needs some level of predictability. Do those seem like meaningful criteria to you?
Uh, yeah, I think that those are really table stakes criteria, right? So you need to have, it needs to be clear what that outcome is. And customers might value outcomes differently. And in that case, you might need to have sort of like a customized menu of what are the outcomes the customer is trying to achieve, what's the value of that outcome. Then there's a proliferation of bespoke contracts. So the simpler you can be around one, target outcome that the vast majority of your customers care about, like that just makes things a lot easier unless you're talking about like massive deal sizes. I think the attribution piece is the challenge that comes up the most. Really, can you convince customers to give your product credit for delivering the outcome? Or do they believe that they drove it? Or are they looking at different data than from what you are? I from back in my consulting days, we thought really hard about charging based on outcomes. I think we tried it sometimes, and I think the fear was that while we were confident a pricing change would lead to increases in revenue, there were a lot of other things the company was going to do that could increase revenue. There's also very different factors around how they roll out pricing changes and how quickly they do it. And, a lot of the results that they were going to get came down to how good the customer was at taking the recommendations and acting on it, not just what we specifically recommended. And so that starts to become really, full of tension. I think the challenge for a lot of software companies, technology companies in general, is you want the customer to be bragging about how great of results they saw. But as soon as you start charging for it, the incentives become to start essentially nickeling and diming and trying to bring down that number because they know they're going to be charged on that number. And so that attribution sort of turf war, that battle starts to remind you of like sales and marketing and who gets credit for a lead, right? When we should all be celebrating the success in that closed won deal. I think the predictability piece is important to your point, Stephen. I think at least with usage-based models, they're unpredictable, but you can estimate usage pretty well. With outcome-based, with an intercom example, I mean, they've told me they have some customers that have had 10, 20% resolution rates. They've had some customers with 80 to 90% resolution rates. So you can estimate the conversation volume or the number of tickets that a customer might have. And if you had usage-based pricing of just how many tickets are you wanting to use AI for, you can estimate that, even though there's some unpredictability. But when you add the usage-based factor and the factor that needs to be multiplied by either 0.2 or 0.9, it just makes pricing much, much harder for people to estimate. Which could be fine if the ROI is so strong. Like if your product has a direct link to revenue, people don't really need to predict it that much. Like your Google search can charge based on number of clicks, and we don't feel bad about that as lack of predictability. We feel like, hey, we're actually willing to up our budget if this is actually driving the right traffic, the right leads, the right actual revenue, as long as we have systems that can attribute those leads that came from Google search into paying customers. I think the final thing I just add is that there's a real-time measurability component. For many folks, you might require customer reporting, A/B testing to show incrementality, proofs of concept. Like to the extent that you don't own the measurement of outcomes, and where you rely on the customer to give you that data, that's going to make these attribution battles even more difficult than they already are, and just makes it so that it's probably more of a headache to try to manage outcome-based pricing than the upside that you're going to get from it.
Yeah. I do think that this is going to resolve over the next few years because we're going to have so much more data. We thought we had a lot of data last year. The amount of data that we have today is an order of magnitude larger, and with the emergence of synthetic data, this is just exploding. So we're going to have more that we can sink our teeth into. And the discipline of causal machine learning, which analyzes attribution, is progressing very, very quickly. We're going to have a causal machine learning moment of the type that we've had with deep learning models, I think, some point in the next 3 years. So I think it's at least conceivable that we will get to this 25% number in 3 years. So I don't dismiss the people responding to this survey. I can imagine a world in where that's true, but I don't think the path there is as easy or straightforward as some people are thinking. But given all of this change and complexity, I think the next topic is going to be of super interest to many people, which is, wow, how do we organize pricing? How do we wrap our minds around this at an organization level? So let's just quickly jump to our second poll. Liam, I'm not seeing the poll up. There we go. Thank you. So I'm going to ask Liam how he would answer this for Ibbaka. Put him on the spot and possibly embarrass me. That was a serious question, Liam.
Well, I mean, you.
There are
Oh
people.
no, many people. No, it's quite collaborative in that way. Yeah.
I think it's some combination of myself, Amar, and Karen. Karen's our chief value officer. Amar acts, he's on our board, but and is a major investor, but he acts as also in many ways as our chief product officer. So it's a combination of the three of us, I would say,
Yeah.
at Ibbaka.
Yeah.
Time to see
Yeah,
what.
we're over a minute for that, so I'll share everyone's pretty much, well, 70%. So yeah. Do you want to guess or
Are you kidding?
okay, I'm gonna end it and here we go.
Pretty widely distributed, isn't it? Okay, thank you. So let's see what Kyle has found and is thinking on this. This is
Yeah, we
this.
probably have some later stage businesses here based on these results, or businesses that are above, let's call it 20 million ARR. But yeah, the data showed really so I worked with a lot of startups, right? And so in the early days of building a startup, obviously the founder, CEO, it gets very involved in sales and marketing, but also in pricing, and there's a whole art and science of that kind of founder-led pricing in the early days. What I found interesting was how founders tend to keep the reins of pricing up to about 20 million ARR. You see, it's still for that group of companies that's in the 5 to 20 million ARR range. Founders, CEOs own pricing about 38% of the time. Now, I also found it interesting, this sort of hot potato that happens over time with pricing. So in the early days, it is that founder, but outside of the founder, in a 1 to 5 million ARR business, it might be the sales leader, right? Because you're building out this repeatable go-to-market motion. That first sales leader becomes really a kind of a powerful constituency around pricing. But then it might get shifted to the product leader at the 5 to 20 million ARR mark, or to just nobody, right? It starts to fall through the cracks as the CEO is trying to hand it off. No one's really taking it. Then in that 20 to 150 million ARR range, it does go to often product or potentially product marketing, but there's a sizable number of times when it's owned by sales, marketing, or finance. And then it starts to shift, I'd say, from product to a more sort of like specialist function within either finance or operations. It might be business operations or pricing rolling into the CFO's office. There's a lot more attention to profitability, discounting behavior, and so on. And so I just found it interesting, the lack of clarity across businesses, right, around who should own pricing, this sort of hot potato that happens, and this 5 to 20 million ARR potential no man's land where pricing is really important at that stage, but there's not an obvious owner who wants to take it.
I have a couple of questions, Cal, but I just want to check. There's a comment that someone made that they've been on the same slide for 10 minutes now. Are other people seeing the slides advancing? So maybe people can just put into chat. Okay, so sorry, Jeffrey, I'm not sure what's happening, but I think it might be on your side, not on ours. Okay, so Kyle, one of the things that surprised me in this data is the low percentage number for sales, and the fact that sales goes down for the $150 million plus ARR companies. Were you surprised at that, or is that what you had expected? And what do you think is behind that?
Well, I mean, sales is always going to be an important stakeholder with pricing, especially like customer by customer pricing. but I see almost no company where I would recommend the sales leader pricing, because I just don't think they're independent enough. I think that it's a topic that needs the input from people closest to the customer, but where there are too many misaligned incentives for sales to fully own it on their own. There's also a number of sort of factors that you might want to take into account around the product roadmap, and a lot of the pricing decisions over time are about new products that you're launching, right? Product is much closer to new products and new product monetization than the sales team is. You also have more attention to profitability. Obviously, that's not as much of a focus of the sales team. You also want to look at a lot more historical data around win rates, a typical discounting behavior, what percentage of deals are you losing because of price, to what extent is pricing a concern around renewals. That's more of the operations and then finance roles, as well. And so I think sales doesn't lose its voice at the table, and I think they are always a loud voice from my experience, but it's generally not the best function to actually own this decision making and coming up with a process that's going to select the right pricing model going forward.
So Kyle, if we could sort of boil down your wisdom and insights into sort of three guiding principles for who should own pricing, and how that should change as companies mature, how would you summarize that into a few key points?
Guiding principles. I think for me, it's less important, like exactly who owns it, as that you have a really engaged owner that does the work around pricing. And so reviewing KPIs, looking at postmortems of what happened with the last pricing change, documenting that, running a process of collecting input from different functions. I'm less concerned about who owns it, is that it actually gets owned. I think that there's a real process around pricing that involves both art and science, and that companies are quick to make pricing decisions without uh, running a good pricing process. And so to me, it's making sure that you have a good pricing process in place and a good cadence for looking at it. And then I think otherwise, to me, there's you want some objectivity. So you want a mix of people that are close to the customer, who understand where the product is going, but also don't have skin in the game around trying to put their thumb on the scale of exactly what the outcome's going to be.
That was super helpful. Kyle, you're going to have to build an agent for that. And then we'll have to figure out what the outcomes are so we can do outcome pricing on that agent. But yeah, the pricing organization agent. Somebody on this webinar should get on that. Speaking of agents, let's go on to the next slide, Liam. So, Kyle, my impression is that over the last, say, 9 months, there's been a transformation, a fundamental change in how people are talking about AI, talking about AI going to market. Maybe it runs back a bit longer than that, but really over the last 9 months. In that, if we'd been having this session last year at this time, I think we would have been talking a lot more about how people are injecting AI into their current applications, a lot more about standalone AI applications, more about the foundation models even. But over the last 9 months, I'm just feeling that the pattern is forming, in which agents are the default way to take AI functionality to market. Am I overstating this, or what's your take on this? You see a lot more companies, I think, than I do.
Well, I think that for many companies, they're realizing just how transformative AI can be. So the early innings of launching AI in products was pretty lightweight use cases, which either companies couldn't monetize because they were relatively limited in terms of capabilities, or they were things that folks tried to monetize as a standalone SKU, but sort of weren't seen as core. They were seen as incremental value propositions. And so this might be like summarizations of something or the ability to query data, right? But not necessarily core to your workflow. I think now there's a lot more interest in building more AI first products and having agents embedded in the product experience. And I think people have seen there was a ChatGPT moment, right, where we all used ChatGPT for the first time and we're like, this doesn't work perfectly, but wow, this is a totally new way of doing things. I do think that products like Cursor, Lovable, Bolt, and V0 created a second ChatGPT moment where we started to realize, oh my gosh, I can build apps with just an agentic workflow through prompting. And not only can I ask it something, I can actually have a two-way conversation where the AI agent is recommending things. I can see a preview of what that looks like. I can edit it in real time. I confirm before I ship it. Once we saw the power of what these experiences with working with AI agents could look like, I think people have gotten a lot more comfortable with it, and companies have started realizing it's becoming more and more table stakes to include these capabilities as part of the core offering. And so I think to me, no one wants to be that legacy SaaS product that's leapfrogged by a next gen AI first company. And so we're all trying to think about, how to become AI native as much as we can, which often means including some sort of AI capabilities as part of that core offering, rather than treating it as sort of like a separate incremental value proposition.
Yeah. So, I mean, you bring up, actually, let's just take a look at the next slide. Then I want to go on to the thing that's the bee in my bonnet right now. But so this is from, I think, SaaStr this week, early this week. And one of the questions that they had is AI eating SaaS or feeding it? And first of all, I'd love to hear first from you, from Carl. Do you think this question makes sense? And if it does, what's your perspective on it?
Well, I struggle with it because I don't necessarily think of AI and SaaS as so separate. Yes, there are certain AI sort of core AI capabilities like underlying LLMs that you might treat as similar to your infrastructure like in AWS. It is becoming a standalone category. But I think for most folks, there are software aspects. So there are integrations they want to set up. There are security concerns, or there's a user experience they need to build. There's data and reporting. Like there are core software features or stores of value. There's also AI stores of value, and there might be sort of data-oriented stores of value, which is also what allows that AI models to get better and better over time as you have more customers or more data within a given customer. And so I don't necessarily think of it as like these separate budgets, and then that's going to start to, if you wonder like, hey, if I use a tool like Granola for note taking, is that a note-taking software budget, or is that an AI software budget, right? I think these are very nuanced, and especially to the extent AI just gets rolled into everything, I just don't think we can treat these as totally separate categories.
Yeah, so I think you're right. Yeah, I'll just sort of take us through Ibbaka's thought process over the last 9 months. And because I think, it's a thought process that a lot of people have been through. So Ibbaka is based on creating value models. So and that's historically where we come from. We were a value-based pricing shop, and we would build value models and use those to inform pricing. Sometime last year, we asked ourselves the question. Well, actually, the question was asked on some forum that I was on, which is, can generative AI generate a value model? And the experts on the forum, who will remain unnamed, said, no, that requires too much knowledge, too much experience, yada, yada, yada. That's something that requires a human expert to do. And I thought, I wonder if that's true. So I and some of the people at Ibbaka, we started building a system to generate value models. And by around December, we'd gotten it to the point where I feel, anyway, this is where benchmarking is important, that we can now generate value models that are better than all but the very best humans. And we can do it in minutes rather than weeks or months or so on, which is hugely changes the game. I had assumed at that time that we were going to use this as an extension to our existing software platform. Um, then I was talking to the CEO of Brighthive, which is a system of agents for data management, a Chicago company. And she walked me through, Suzanne El Masuri, and she walked me through her personal story of how they developed Brighthive. And as she was talking, I thought, wow, this was, by the way, my first aha moment this year. It was, wow, what we have been developing should really be taken to market as an agent and not just be an extension to our current functionality. Then, as we started messing around with how to build that agent, we started building it in Lovable. And so we currently have a somewhat different agent, but it uses the value model generation where the front end is built in Lovable and the middleware is Vellum, which is an AI middleware layer. And then there's a bunch of stuff that happens behind it. But this process of can we do it? Yes. Is this part of our current offering? Yes. Oh no, wait a minute. We need to rebuild completely on AI as an agent. Are you seeing other people go through this sort of experience and thought process as you look at the different companies you're engaged with?
Uh, yes and no. It really varies a lot based on the product. But I think what happens that I find interesting is just AI advancements can take this sort of way of thinking from, oh, this is never going to be possible. AI products can be incrementally valuable, but they're not going to replace what we're doing. And then all of a sudden, the underlying LLMs can get so good that the calculus flips. And I think that's where some interesting disruptions happen. So I recently interviewed the CEO of StackBlitz, which makes Bolt. Now they were founded back in 2017, and it took them 7 years to hit 700,000 in ARR. They were running out of cash. They had a couple months of runway left. And this was a company that was building essentially like an IDE or development environment in the browser. Now, once Claude 3.5 Sonnet came out, they realized how good coding could get, and they could stream code through that in-browser IDE. They pivoted completely to focus on building Bolt. They built it, I think, in about 2 months. They launched it, and it went from 0 to 4 million ARR in a month, and then hit 20 million by the end of a quarter, and then hit 40 million after 5 months. I think they're on track for 100 million in the next couple months. And so this is where the underlying advancements of the foundational technology can totally change the equation. And so I think the challenge that we all have to face is like, where is it that, these AI sort of native capabilities or being AI first, where is it ready today? Where will it never be ready? And where might it be ready soon? We just don't know how soon.
Yeah, yeah. So one of the questions that came to me as I was playing with both Lovable and Replit. So I've been playing with building and rebuilding a bunch of different applications, including some standard applications that we all know and use using both Lovable and Replit. One of the things I've been doing is asking them, how would you package and price this? Now, today, the quality of the answers you get are pretty bad. But I have to remember, right, that the AI I'm using today is the worst AI I will ever use. So could the future of pricing and packaging be inside the vibe coding applications themselves? I have a poll on this, by the way, that I would love to have people take. I've also got an AI simulation running to see how different people in different roles might answer this poll. But Kyle.
I think to me, AI doesn't have access to lots of data around pricing, right, for specific companies and across companies, right? They haven't necessarily seen and been trained on what pricing models work well, what pricing changes work well. A lot of that is private information. So I do think that there's a chance for AI to get really good at pricing, but they need to have access to the data to be able to train the models to be able to make those right decisions. And otherwise, they're going to be training it on based on maybe what they see out in the world or like what they see written about online, which is not the same thing as the underlying data of what works. Um, the other thing for me is that pricing is so fundamental to the way you position a company, the story you tell, and feedback you get from specific customers. There's a generic pricing where your pricing can more or less match the competitive dynamics and what else is out there. And then there's the real disruptive models, the people that win by thinking a little bit differently or having an insight about buying behavior that's not consistent with what everyone else is doing. And so I think that in the shorter term, AI will probably regurgitate what is normal or expected as opposed to what's innovative. But at the same time, that's probably still better than 70 or 80% of pricing people. And pricing people, as you've seen in this prior slide, is usually just founders who are spending a little bit of time on pricing. So it can get you to that V1, but it's probably not going to get you to that, best answer.
Yeah, I think this is actually a common problem with Gen AI is that if you're not smart and creative with how you prompt it, you are going to get somewhat generic answers to your questions. I think that you've I think put a good focus on what the problem is for pricing and packaging, but it's actually a general problem. So I have another thread running on my AI asking about will vibe coding lead to a sort of dumbing down and lowest common denominator set of UIs or not? And it found that the AI found some very interesting UI libraries on Hugging Face that can be integrated into your vibe coding app that left me feeling pretty excited and hopeful. But anyway, Liam, we've got a few minutes left for questions. I see one right at the bottom, but do you want to call us to help us through the questions, and we'll
Yeah, you know what? Let's do Christian's first. Just because Christian's been, yeah, they posted it quite a few minutes ago. So Christian asked, do you think in the future customers prefer to buy software services labeled as AI agents rather than SaaS solutions? I think they will prefer to buy AI agents because AI agents represent the idea to get a job done efficiently.
Yeah, it's a good question. My 2 cents on this is that I think that right now people don't want to buy either AI agents or SaaS. They want to buy something that solves the problem that they face. And so the value messaging or homepage messaging or how you define the product, I think that being overly focused on the technology of how you solve it is less important than actually what you're doing for the customer, what job you're taking on for them. So I just caveat that as a starting point. And then in terms of like AI versus SaaS, uh, I think that there's a real appetite right now for folks to adopt AI solutions. I see whenever I publish something on my newsletter about AI, like the interest is just so much higher, and I think that's because people are realizing this is a new skill that they need to learn. It's going to be fundamental. Learning this skill is going to be fundamental to just about uh, every job that they have and every role in a company. They're even increasingly getting evaluated on their performance based on their familiarity with AI. And so I think we're in a moment of time where if you're not positioning in some ways as AI, cause a large set of customers will not even consider what you're doing. And so I do expect to see a lot of positioning as AI, regardless of how much AI is actually included in a solution, because I do think people will see it as just core to being part of the consideration set for at least a subset of customers.
Great. I think we're near time. So first I want to thank Kyle. Incredibly insightful as always. And thank you everyone for coming. We will be sharing the deck and some other resources along with the recording. Liam, can you just go on to the next slide? So I just want to let people know that Ibbaka is bringing out a AI-powered value selling agent / co-pilot that is actually built on our value model generation agent. So if you're interested in this, please sign up for our beta. You can find it at valueiq.ai. And this is the first of a series of agents that we're going to be bringing out over the next 6 months. And no, we have not yet figured out how to price it. It's very embarrassing for me to say that, but that's the case. We're going to take a little bit of a vacation from webinars. We've had quite a few in June, so we're going to take a little bit of time off in July. But Liam, what do we have planned next?
I think we said Amar and you are going to be doing some product demos in July. I know webinars, people are on vacation and then school's back in September. We'll figure it. We got a couple of in the pipeline, but no concrete dates. Karen Chang, Ibbaka's Chief Value Officer, she's just starting her VIP vodcast series. So VIP stands for Value, Innovation, and Pricing. We've already put that up on YouTube, and we thought we'd try and leverage that and just see how it goes on Spotify. But webinars, yeah, people will get an update in the inbox for sure when we ping down a time, Stephen. I know everyone's busy with Value IQ, but yeah, I just want to say thanks to Kyle once again. I know he's super busy always. But yeah, again, download his report, follow Growth Unhinged, follow Stephen, follow Kyle. Stephen's always forwarding me Kyle's posts from LinkedIn. I like that one that he posted the other day about, engagement and, posting on LinkedIn. Sundays work surprisingly well, which I was like, oh, wow, that's pretty interesting. Because I joined a webinar by Goldcast last week, and they said that webinars are the most successful on a Monday, which is insane because you would think webinars aren't very successful on a Monday because everyone's back to the grind. Because historically, I think it was Thursdays and then Tuesdays and Wednesdays, or Wednesdays and Tuesdays. But yeah, but I liked how Kyle put that in his post that Sundays work surprisingly well. Always good bits of info to act upon. So yeah, thanks everyone.
Okay, thank you everyone, and
Thanks again, Kyle. Thanks, Stephen.